What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we will take a look at our first figure from Wave 3 of the Collector series from McFarlane, and that is going to be Green Lantern Batman. Now, this is kind of a preemptive strike because today, just randomly at lunch, I had time to run into a Target and check it out. Didn't find anything in the regular toy aisle, but I did find this figure in the collector's area where they have the NECA stuff. So I was really surprised to see it just sitting there on the shelf and went ahead and scooped it up. And now we'll go ahead and take a look at them. Now, out of the three figures, I thought in my mind that this is the one that I was really wanting to take a look at. Nothing against Captain Carrot or his fans, but I don't know. I just don't feel too much connection to that character. And then the Superman, I mean, he's cool for nostalgia purposes. And in all honesty, I always have that rule where never judge a figure or never take people's advice on a figure until you actually have them in your own hands and you can actually take a look at them for yourself. So although I do appreciate everybody's opinions, I always end up making my own choices. Now this guy looks pretty emerald in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, the only difference is that the DC logo is printed in a silver color. Oh, I used to separate these, but now we will add this one to my giant stack here on the desk. He also comes with his data file card. Now, of course, these cards are a little bit more premium than your standard DC Multiverse figure card, but just a little bit sleeker feel, and they do have that foil silver color. Pretty nice image of Green Lantern Batman here on the front from the comics. There are some things that I like about this figure, and there's some things that I don't like. One of the first glaring things for me is the color of the gloves right here on the card. You could actually see that they are usually white, but we'll take a look at that here in a bit. On the back, you do have some information. Pretty cool. We'll hold on to that. Now, he does come with a pretty good load of accessories, which is something that people have been asking for from McFarlane. So this guy is stacked with accessories. Now, per usual, when I review the figure, I like to have him with double fist. But he also does come with two open gripping hands. One does have the ring printed on it. Now, these are actually the same hands that would come with your Three Jokers Batman or even the Hush Batman. They have that sort of printed design on the back, sort of grooved. And pretty surprising because now I guess McFarlane has a good array of these hands. So I guess he could start, issuing them with more figures. The only negative about that is that these are certain hands that have this sort of print on them, a sculpt work on them. So he also comes with two gesturing hands, one sort of open flight hand, and then one sort of just emoting hand. But pretty cool. Altogether, that is 6 different hands. So we'll hold on to those. Always appreciated. He does come with his battery for the lanterns. Now, the color choice on this, people were saying that these are not constructs, so they shouldn't be really like energized, translucent plastic lanterns. But this one kind of has a weird, almost watermelon green color to it. So, not too sure what I think about that. I think if they weren't going to make it nice and translucent plastic, they should have painted it the metallic green color that is on the figure. That would have fit really well. And he also does come with two power effects. Now, these go on either hand. They are basically the same, just mirrored, but they do slide on pretty well and look okay. But once again, as I said, since they are like a darker, more solid plastic, they kind of don't give that energy effect to them. They kind of just look like he has two like rotting watermelons on each hand. But I hardly ever use these, so it's not a big deal. You can always go and use the effect from Alan Scott, which probably, this is what I'm trying to say. You see the difference, how this looks like energy and this just looks like a glob of goop, but we'll still hold on to them. Never turn down some fodder or energy effects. That's the rule. That's it. The only other thing he does come with is his card stand, which of course McFarlane has this dream that people are going to put the card stand next to the figure and then display the card with it. Really wish this could have been something else. I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, this is starting to add up. I've got tons of these. And now let's go ahead and take a closer look at the figure. First impressions, we have actually received figures of Green Lantern Batman before. I think the DC Direct one, which is one I never, got my hands on, goes for pretty good money. And although it only has 5 points of articulation, it is very striking, a good looking figure. I think that might be the only one. I'm not sure, but that might be the only Green Lantern Batman we ever received. Now, although this one does give off the vibes of Green Lantern Batman. The first thing that caught my attention is not something really big, but for me it is. So I don't know how you guys are going to feel about it, but the belt and the gloves should really be white. Now, I didn't mention that looking at the card. I just feel like if the gloves were white and the belt was white, it would just give a lot more vibrance to this figure, like a lot more pop. You would right away you would see the contrast of the dark costume with the emerald green, with that white just really radiating off the figure. And since they actually went with like a silver, it just doesn't do it for me. Now, I'm not too sure that I will actually go and repaint these white. I don't think it's that needed. But this is why I always say that McFarlane should have some sort of consultant that, makes the final decision or gives a final opinion and says, like, no, do not do that. Those gloves should definitely be white unless you're planning to have another figure in the future that is going to have an alternate head and the white gloves. I mean, the different color scheme. Because we did see that the actual platinum for this figure is just like a clear, translucent version of the figure. So basically, as far as we know, this is the only one we're going to get. Um, Depending on how far the line goes, I could see, a 5 pack of lanterns and then throwing a Batman in there, but with a different head sculpt and with the white gloves. So that's just like something that I thought, about the figure. And another thing is the emblem. Now, the emblem, although painted really crisply and looks good, nice and clean, it is just painted on the chest. Now, people might say, well, that's not a big deal. A lot of companies just paint the emblems. But the thing about that is one of the reasons I actually really got into the McFarlane DC Multiverse was for the sculpted details. So if this was just raised and a little sculpted, that would just be like, the chef's kiss that would really take this figure to the next level. And then the white sculpted emblem with the white gloves would just give it like a full complete look. But of course, these are just my opinion. And one thing you do have to remember, and we all have to remember, is that someone that sees this on the shelf is just going to see a cool Batman mixed with Green Lantern. They are not necessarily going to notice the gloves or that the emblem is just painted on. And although that is something that collectors really notice, that is why this is called the collector line, because we should be having more accurate to the comics with more details. And they're getting there. It's getting a little bit better, but it's just those little details, especially from me, that I'm like really big on details and doing things exactly, that kind of irks me a little bit. Now, I will keep riding with the line, and then let's see, the future collector editions, if they could lose the stand and add more head sculpts, which is what I thought should have come with this one. This head sculpt, I gotta say, let's look at it. I really like the head sculpt. It looks really good. It actually looks almost like a premium head sculpt that has cool paint and tones around the mouth and the flesh tones. The mouth looks better. This is probably the best screaming head that McFarlane has made, because I didn't really like the Aquaman from Flashpoint screaming head. Wasn't a big fan of the Spawn and Batman 2-pack screaming head, but this one actually looks really nice. But I just feel like it would be a lot better for collectors if you had an alternate head, because if you look on the card or on the back art, that Batman looks perfect. You should actually look at that image, and that should be what we receive in the package. Regular head sculpt, white gloves, sculpted emblem. I mean, all that stuff matters to me. So although I am pretty much enjoying this figure, a little bit inside of me kind of doesn't like the fact of the little details, because like I said, I am a big, a guy all about the details. So nice looking figure. Like I said, if you look at the head sculpt, it looks awesome. Now here's another thing, that I'm gonna I'm gonna say that's a negative for me, and that is that I'm not a big fan of these, of these heads that are on the plug. Now I know McFarlane likes to use these, and the main reason I do not like them, although the sculpt of it looks good, because you don't have to have that separated head and neck, so it looks a little bit more realistic or like straight out of the comics, but you do not get any look up with these figures at all. I mean, just barely. And then one big drawback of this is that with these plug heads, when you try and look up, you get that gap right under the neck right away, and it's just not functional. I just don't like that. So either figure out how the plug's going to move all the way without, having any gappage, or just use a neck and head separate, because that just always works a lot better. Although it might not look as good and clean, it just for functionality, it would work a lot better. And like I said, look, you could look down really well with this head. That's awesome. Gives them a lot of emotion, but you just cannot look up. It's it just, and it's, you start getting that gap. You do that right to left, and then surprisingly, you can tilt his head for some attitude. That's pretty kooky. Another thing is when he comes out of the package, the ears are really warped inwards. I did get some footage of this so you could tell the difference. I just heated them up with the heat gun, and they sort of expand on their own. So you could get them, you don't want them straight up, but you do want them to be a little bit more vertical than they actually were. So the head, I like it. It looks cool. It looks like, like a premium statue. Really photogenic. I'll give them that. But just the functionality, like I said, and the way you're stuck with just one, screaming head is, starting to be kind of a negative for me. Now let's move on to the next thing. I'm not going to go a lot into articulation in this one, because this is your basic Three Jokers Batman body. You could see it right away from the boots and the body. It's just a tiny bit more slender proportions on this figure than the Hush Batman, which actually work for this figure. That's fine. But the articulation is basically the same, except for one giant thing that I did notice when I was like moving him around to pose, and that is that he actually has a pretty nice forward crunch. Now, the way you could see this is if you start with him standing straight up and you push them forward, the upper chest actually collapses over all of the abdominals, and it hits the top of that belt. So that's how you know you're actually getting a lot more crunch. So Three Jokers Batman was notorious for not having any forward crunch at all. So I'd be really interested to open up this one and then open up the three Jokers and see what the difference is. Why does this one have such an excellent crunch while the three Jokers Batman has virtually non existent forward crunch? So that's another cool thing that McFarlane is trying to advance in the articulation. And although I really think that the ab crunch is just one of the only negatives with the articulation for McFarlane, they have a lot of really superior forms of articulation, and it's just the ab crunch that people are always harping on. So really happy to see that everything else is your basic articulation. Now going into that, I did see something else that didn't make me happy, and that is that if you look at the green paint on the shoulders, it's a sort of metallic emerald green. Looks really nice, really top tier color of paint. Now, if he would have just added this to also the upper chest and to the rings in the shoulder socket, now when you move down into the abdomen, it kind of looks a little bit more like that metallic green paint. And when you move down, he has a little costume design here on the trunks. And even that is actually painted in that metallic emerald green. But when you move down to the boots, those are just molded in a sort of shiny, glossy, just cheap looking plastic. And I just think that premium paint would make this figure look awesome and would really make the price of these collector's figures really worth it. And I think that's what McFarlane's missing. Even if he were to take away the card stand and not give an alternate head, but use that little bit of money to really hit the figure with the metallic green paint, it would just take these to the next level. But even after all of that, this is a really nice figure. It has some positives, it has some negatives, but I'll tell you what it really has. And this is kind of like the final thing I will talk about. This figure really has some awesome shelf presence. Like you could move him around and pose him, and he looks really good. You can get him in some awesome, action poses. You can put the lantern in his hand, and it just gives him a lot more substance. You can add the effects to him, and although they are not my favorite green color, they do give him some, added effect for figure photography. Now the hands are another thing that McFarlane is getting really good at. You can just pop those off and then pop in any alternate hand and works really well. Now this is what I mean is you put that hand in there, just move him a little bit, get him in a pose, and he looks really nice. I mean, I'll say this, as much of the gripes that I just put about the figure, I'm really happy with him, and I'm having a lot of fun posing them and messing around with them. So now I do know everybody out there wants to know some certain things. One of those being, let's go ahead and tackle scale, because I did see a lot of comments of people saying that why is this Green Lantern Batman like a lot shorter than the other Batmans? Did McFarlane finally fix his, scaled issues? And sorry to burst your bubble. Another thing is this guy is really easy to stand. I'm not sure why, but they were kind of working on that, I guess, because look at that. I'm not sure why, but he is not shorter than a lot of figures. He's actually basically your taller Batman. I mean, just nip it in the bud and bring him out, and this is going to be Nightfall Batman. And this one is, easy to see that this one is way shorter than this Green Lantern Batman. But of course, the true, difference maker is the Hush Batman. And now you can see that the Hush Batman and the Green Lantern Batman are pretty much about the same size. So no, he is not shorter than a lot of other Batmans. But as I've always said, it's cool to have this figure. You could use them for different purposes, put them up with different characters, and then you have like a Nightfall Batman, which is a little bit more average height, and use him for different stuff. So I actually like having, different versions of a character and also different sizes. so you could mix and match, throughout your collection. So I don't necessarily think that there is anything wrong with this. Now, I'm not too sure if I'll be doing any custom work on this Batman. I mean, it might be something that I, would look into. And then, another thing I have heard before is like, oh, you always have to customize the McFarlane figures because they suck and you have to fix them. And I'm like, let me just tell you one thing. I have been customizing and painting figures since way before I was collecting McFarlane DC Multiverse. I think I remember being a little kid and cutting out stickers, like cutting out different symbols and stickers and sticking them on my little figures. But this actually here, this is my own custom. I actually made this, years ago when I was collecting DC Universe Classics, and they never made a Green Lantern Batman. So I made my own. And this just goes to show you that no, I don't have to fix McFarlane figures. I always customize my figures to take them to that next level, or to make figures that we never got in the line, or to make my own custom concept figures that I always enjoy doing. But I remember making this guy was really fun. I think he's a mixture between New 52 Batman and a John Stewart buck that I used, but always happy to have him in the collection. And this is actually where I first, started preparing my skill and learning how to really get down in the dirt and customize cutting, sculpting. Soon you guys will see my custom classic Hawkman that I'm working on, but I'm not done. I got a couple more details, but then I will show it to you guys. But I have always done this. I have always worked on my figures and made them to my own liking. And in fact, it's actually really therapeutic for me. I really enjoy it. And it gives me, something to chill and relax and do. Now, speaking of customizing and doing stuff like that, I did want to try some different heads on this figure just because I think the Screaming Head, although it does have a lot of style and character, I just wanted to see a neutral head on there. So I tried a couple of different heads. Now, if you wanted the texture of the cape to match the cowl, I did try the Three Jokers head on there. It This really shows you how that Three Jokers head has a kind of a weird shape to it. It kind of looks small sitting on this figure. I'm not sure why. But then I did try the Dark Knight Metals Batman, that sort of battle damaged head. This one has a pretty cool look, but it kind of gives it more like a cartoonish look. Like it doesn't look like like real. It looks weird. It looks kind of like I'm just not sure how I felt about this head, but it just is something different. Now, to keep the ears really long, like the way these are on the Green Lantern Batman figure, I wanted to try the Batman from the Spawn and Batman 2 pack. And I did modify the mouth so he wouldn't be so angry. This one has more of like a grimacing head version. It looks okay. It kind of gives it like a spooky feel, like a little bit, alternate universe, but not too bad. Pretty interesting look for him. And then finally, of course, I tried the Batman Hush, but the black version. And I have to say, I actually really like this head. I mean, I don't really know about the short ears, but just the presence that it gives this figure, it just gives it a more toned down, feel than that, yelling head. And that could this can actually show you what it would look like if McFarlane would have just gave us an alternate static head. It just looks really clean and does really pump up the presence for this figure on the shelf. So, anyways, guys, like I said, really fun figure, really awesome to pose. He feels really good in hand. Aside from the negatives that I stated, he does have a lot of positives. I think McFarlane is, inching his way forward into a little bit better of product for us for the collector series. But anyways, you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Fat Man.